All right. Hi, how are you?
I'm alive and kicking.
I mean, that's all we can hope
That's
for, right?
not a little when you're 86, almost 87.
I don't know. And God bless that you're able to be here to kind of continue talking about what's really important, which is, of
Exactly,
course,
exactly. I
not
was,
only anti-Semitism, but just the fact that you survived one of the worst historic, horrible events.
besides in history, you're quite right. It's no less and not more than that. It's not the only one, but it was I guess, the deadliest and horrific one in all history, or probably of mankind, I would say.
And it was just so calculatingly evil. It just brought out the worst instincts of mankind, which, as we see, is, well, like here in America, it's rearing its ugly head.
You are quite right. The fact that it was done by and led by the Germans, which in their character they like everything very orderly and how would you say, planned. The fact that I sometimes think, and sometimes I've also spoken to German people, the very idea that a nation that gave to the world people like Mozart and Brahms and Beethoven and Goethe and who knows how many great people, this nation produced people like Himmler and Hitler and Goering, and these people sat around the table and planned and talked how to annihilate an entire people is almost unimaginable. Almost unimaginable.
Well, since I've been listening to stories about this since childhood, because as you know, I mentioned my mother survived Dachau. I've been imagining this my whole life. So where I am in America now, to see some of the ugly, human instincts that people do have coming to light, I am not, I am prepared for the fight, so I know you were from Czechoslovakia, yes?
Yes. You ask some questions and I'll answer you, and then we can talk some more if you like.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I did a little research, but I saw that you were in the camps from 41 to 45, right?
Yes, for 4 years, yes.
Did you go, was there ghettos before you went to the camps? Or did you go straight from home to a concentration camp?
No, I went, you see, the Germans started setting up concentration camps even before 41.
Yes,
In
right.
Germany. You spoke about Dachau. That was one of them. I just visited there a couple of months ago. We were living in Sudetenland, which was the western part of the Czech Republic. Remember, the Czech Republic only was born in 1918 at the end of World War I.
Right.
And that's when that's when the Germans, their entire empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, fell apart. And Slovakia was born in Hungary and Poland and who knows how many countries, I don't really know. I never did research on that. And so we were living in that part that Hitler claimed as his, rightful his, belonged to. And in 1918, Chamberlain and the French prime minister, whose name I don't remember, made as if a compromise, will give him the Sudeten and there'll be peace in the world. Of course, it was total bullshit.
Right.
It was totally ridiculous, because within hours of signing the agreement, the German army was in the Sudeten. Simply the Czech army had melted away. They were demobilized, sent home, arms and ammunition, everything was returned to the storerooms, and the German army was in there. And between 35 and 38, I was born in 35, so 38, I was 3 years old. My parents and my grandparents on my father's side decided we can't stay here anymore. The Jews have lost all rights. They couldn't do business. They couldn't find doctors. They couldn't go to a hospital. I mean, it was terrible. Of course, I didn't know this because I was only 3 years old. So part of it, of course, are stories that my parents spoke about and so forth and so on. So we took a night train to Prague and rented an apartment and lived there for 3 years. But of course, within, I don't remember exactly how long it was, a month, 2 or 3 months, Hitler took over the entire country.
Right.
There was no reason why not to. There was no army, because nobody was holding them back. And the highway between Karlovy Vary and Prague was straight road. And then they took over the entire country. And from that moment on, Jews were second-class citizens, if at all. We had to wear the Star of David. We couldn't be outside of our house after 8 o'clock. We couldn't ride in streetcars during the day, or only in certain streetcars, and only sitting at the back of the streetcars. I mean, we had to hand in typewriters and radios and cameras and everything. So they took total control. I mean, you spoke on your TikTok about the suffering of the Black people in America, which is quite comparable to the suffering of the Jewish people, except in the Second World War, it was just taken to an extreme of total annihilation, and they spoke about it openly.
Right. Yeah. I always try to bring light to the plight that Jews and Blacks have suffered, because I feel like there is still, a little bit of a separation of our camps, when really we're suffering the same kind of, animosity. And I'll just continue to fight for that. I was bused to an all Black. So I was raised by both parents survived the Holocaust. To get away from that, they moved to America. And then my father didn't want to stay in Brooklyn, which was like, a Jewish enclave. They took us to New Jersey, where I was immediately the recipient of anti-Semitism. So it was kind of, a dichotomy of the way my family wanted to live their lives in freedom. But it was a great teaching moment for me, and it has been my whole life. And it's why I'm very outspoken, and I had, I just kind of, I just want everyone to kind of realize that the fight is not that far away from what you and my parents survived. Because if you look at the timeline, I say this all the time, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf in 23. By 1933, he was already the chancellor. So that's 10 years. And when Donald Trump started talking about Obama's birth certificate, was already 2015. No, 2007. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes,
he might not be the idiot to create another, Nazi invasion, but he's birthing all that. He's bringing light to that animus and that hatred and that racist, I don't know. I just,
racist, very simple racist ideology.
yeah.
There's no other way of saying whether it's against the blacks, the Jews, the Spanish population, the
Native Americans, Asians,
American.
we're the monolith. We're the group that needs to fight the white supremacy because it's here and it's happening and it's growing. It's not like just a few hundred, it's not like just a couple 100,000 people, it's millions, and it's going to be much more different than what happened in Germany. It's going to be more dangerous because in Germany, it was kind of clear cut, if they took over your country, that was the end of that. But here it's all mushed up and it's like there's no clear lines of distinction. It's not like the Civil War where it's North and South.
Right.
It's got all sorts of danger wrapped up around it. So I understand you went to Terezin.
Terezin.
Yeah. So I'm sure that there's like a musical about that was on Broadway, I believe, or off Broadway about terrorism.
No, there are a lot of plays.
Yeah.
A lot of plays. You have to understand, Theresienstadt was a concentration camp just 50 some odd kilometers north of Prague. And it had been a army camp from before the First World War. And it was also a village. So my father and my grandfather were amongst the first transports. They were of men only to set things up, put up the barbed wires, put in the bunks and whatever. I don't know what everything they did. And my mother and I only followed my father and my grandfather to the same camp about 10 days later. And this is all documented. They're documented.
Right.
One of the things that's typically German. They kept documents. Of course, the Jews did the keeping of the documents. They did the writing and the sorting and the organizing, but it was all under German direction.
Right.
So there's lots of documentation, and you can see it. I saw it. I discovered, for example, for all these years since the end of World War II, when we found that nobody from my family came back, only my mother and I survived. We thought that my father had died on the death march. At the end of the war, as the Germans were retreating, they were emptying the concentration camps, and those men and women who could still walk somehow would go with them. I'm not totally sure exactly what the reason for that was. It might be because they thought that if they had these terrible, poor, weak people with them, maybe the Americans or British or Russians wouldn't shoot at them. That might be an answer. But my father, turns out, was not on one of those marches, because we found out just a few months ago in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem that my father actually was a part of the medical experiments that were taking place in Auschwitz. And then he was sent at the end of the war to Buchenwald. And there is the end of our knowledge about him. He either died on the way to Buchenwald or in Buchenwald itself. There are very few documents about Buchenwald.
I think the reason why they did those death marches was just to torture to the last possible second. I don't think they were shielding themselves. They knew it was game over. And they just, my uncle, I don't know, did Julie show you the film, the project that I'm working on about my uncle's story?
No, she didn't.
You'll take a look. My uncle was killed in Kluga concentration camp, which was in Estonia. And he was a musician, and him and his, my family was from Vilna originally. And they wrote a song as like a hymn, as like a personal kind of mantra to stay strong and resist the emotional, impact that the Nazis were having on. And it became a song that he was killed hours before the liberation. And a couple of years ago, we did the research and found out that the Russians were invading Estonia and freeing whatever the camps were. And the Germans, just out of spite, made the last remaining, or some of the last remaining, the ones who didn't escape at that point, run nude into the woods, shoot them in the back, then put them on a pyre and burn their bodies. Like we found pictures of that. It's like they were just, it's what's always so unfathomable to me is that these were people that did this. It was like a 9-to-5 job, and then they would go home from their job of killing people or torturing people or burning people or shooting babies in the air, and then go home to their dog and their kids and Christmas. And it was as though they had they were psychotically split mentally to two different worlds. They lived a day and they lived a night. And the scary part of what's going on in this country is that you don't even have that separation of day and night, because it's not anyone's job. These people are just cuckoo 24 hours a day, you know what I mean? And capable of who knows what once they get enough structure and organize. It's not going to be Trump that does that, but it'll be 4 years, 8 years until who knows what, where the Jews and or Blacks and or Native Americans and or Latinos and or Asians are all going to have to go into some kind of compromised existence, because white people in America, which started this country, let's face it, this country was started by a bunch of religious zealots who had to get out of Europe because they weren't welcome there anymore. You know what I mean? Like, America is based on a very unhealthy, religious, psychotic point of view, Puritans, frigid, you know what I mean? Unsexy, just like horrible people. So that's in the DNA of this country, which is why when I know what happened in Europe, it's even harder to imagine, because they were so sophisticated and educated. And
that's exactly, you hit it exactly on the head of the nail. That's as I told you before, that's exactly the thing that somehow I find it hard to imagine and to accept. How can these be? But they were. And what, just lately I wasn't aware for a long time that so many of these concentration camps, which were also partly work camps, they were both, actually existed in Germany itself. Not in Poland, not in Hungary.
Oh, yeah.
But in Germany itself, many of them were right there. So there were many people, German ordinary people, who somehow must have heard, smelled, seen what's happening over the hill.
Knew and worked at. They worked there. If this was a work camp, the thing is, what nobody really knows, that between, everyone thinks, oh yeah, there was like 6 concentration camps, the obvious names. But between the camps and the sub-camps, there were like something like 40,000 concentration camps
Yep.
throughout Europe.
Exactly.
Nobody knows about it.
I had never thought that there were so many. Never, ever. But look, that's why we lost 6 million of our people.
Yeah.
It is not simple to kill 6 million people.
Oh, no, 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 no. Look how hard it is to kill one like Trump. You know what I mean?
Okay. Anyway, you and I, as long as I'm alive, have to tell our story and fight hate and violence against not only Jews, against Blacks and Puerto Ricans and Spanish people and even Muslims and anybody who's become a victim
Yes.
of violence and hate.
Well, that's the mission I'm on since I told you my uncle's piece of music was lost because he was killed in 1944.
Yes.
So the music and all his whole body of work, I mean, he was the conductor of the Vilnius Symphony Orchestra. He was quite accomplished, but he was dead in 1944. And then 3 years ago, the Holocaust Museum contacted my family. They found the piece of music written in a book in Israel that one of the survivors from that camp said, write down this piece of music. It became what we used to sing to kind of keep ourselves together. And when I heard that, and being an activist, I felt I wanted to give not only my uncle an much deserved legacy and story and give a name, and he's not just one of the 6 million anonymous Jews. So I've been on this journey to make this film about this piece of music. So it's almost like the documentary is about it's the story of the piece of music. That's the main character that comes from the ashes of the Holocaust and is brought to life. And I have all these different artists interpreting it in different languages, in different genres. And the song was originally written as Stay Silent. That was the prayer. Stay silent, don't let them take your tears, keep your dignity. That was the message. And I wanted to give it a more dynamic message with the same intention. So my friend who's a songwriter gave it the new lyrics, and now it's called Won't Be Silent, which is what my whole message is. And that's what my podcast is all about. It's bringing people together to speak up against oppression, social injustice. And again, I just can't say it enough. We are all in this together. We are fighting white supremacy. It is here, it is now, it is time to get ready because the fight is about to begin. And that's all there is to it. And if voting is one of the tools you have, if voting in America is the one piece of ammunition you have, then damn, you better use it. You know, that's the whole thing.
I totally agree with you. I can't add much to what you said because it's true. The whole idea, I mean, I think the basis of all that is hate of another human being because of his color, nationality, religious beliefs, or other beliefs. That is, in the end, self-destructive, but it also destroys the people that it is aimed at. And that's what we have to deal with, both in America, in Israel, all over the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's never going away. Look, the sad thing is humans are going to always have good and bad inside of them. It's a matter of how you choose to live your life a day at a time and make those decisions. Life is choice. If you want to be like how the Germans were in 1940s and 30s, like Yeah, that's your choice, but be now in this time, be prepared for the results that are going to happen to that, because I just don't see people laying down and rolling over like they did back then.
No, you know, the world has changed. This is a different world than the world of the 30s and 40s. The communication and the electronic media is very difficult to hide things, to do things that nobody will know. Within minutes, somebody is shot in Eilat, we know it here.
Right.
So, you know, and goes to CNN.
Yeah, of course. Yes, social media definitely is an opportunity to keep our message alive. But look at the laws here in America. Look how much corruption is going on in America.
That existed all the time. You
Yeah,
forget.
true.
Before you were even born properly.
After the war, did you go to a displaced persons camp? Where?
No, no. You see, my mother and I survived in the same camp. The only two of us from our whole family of about 26, 28 people. And we didn't know who and if anybody else survived. So we went back first to where we lived before we were sent to the concentration in Prague. And when nobody returned, we returned actually to the city that I was born in, which was Karlovy Vary, Carlsbad. And we lived there for 3 years. It turns out that a great aunt in Brooklyn, New York, was searching for any family members that might still have survived. And she found us, and then she took out an affidavit. And then 3 years later, we were allowed to come and immigrate to America, because I don't know if you know this, but America didn't just open their
I don't know, of course.
gates and say, oh, come, you survived, so come to us. No. There was a certain amount, thousands or 500 or thousands or 100, I don't know how many it was each, but can be researched, who was allowed of Jews who had survived the Holocaust. And we waited and we waited and waited. And then in April or February of 1948, we all of a sudden received notification from the American consulate that our number has arrived and we can emigrate to America. And by June 7th, we landed in the United States of America in Brooklyn, New York, right on
Hester Street.
with my great grand aunt and a cousin, and we started life. I actually had wanted by then already to go to Israel, to come to Israel, because I had joined the Zionist Youth Organization, but I was a kid. Mother says, we're going to America, we go to America.
How old were you by the time? You were born in 36, you said? So
born in 35, I was 13 years old when I arrived in America.
Which youth organization did you join?
I started off in Czechoslovakia, I started off in Dror, Echalutz Tzayir, but in Brooklyn, I found Hashomer HaTzayir, left-wing Zionist Socialist Youth Organization, which definitely aimed for young people to come to Israel.
Right.
And that's 10 years later, I arrived at the Haifa port and went straight from the port to the kibbutz that our group was assigned to, which was in the Jezreel Valley, kibbutz Hazorea, and I became a full-time farmer.
Cool.
Plowed the fields, the Jezreel Valley, milked the cows, and started life in building the country, or continued building the country, and here I am today.
My dad, after he was sent, my dad was from Warsaw. He was sent to Siberia for a good part of the war, and then he escaped. He joined the Bricha, which is the underground that were smuggling the women and children and people out of Germany to the boats, taking them to Palestine.
Yeah.
So I found these amazing pictures of my dad, like walking people through the Italian Alps, because the route was Germany, Italy, the whole food of Italy, into boats to Israel.
Boats to Israel.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many amazing stories, and that's why we have to just keep them alive, you know?
That's why we have to keep it alive, you know? And, you know, I've lately, especially in the last year or so, I've appeared before many different groups, also in high schools. And, you know, even in Israel, people really don't know how things were. The fact that, for example, we in Theresienstadt had no idea what was really going on in all those concentration camps in the East. We only knew that they were bad, that they were more difficult, that people were starving to death. But the fact is, we really didn't know, because the Germans didn't want us to know, because had we known, there would have been many uprisings, because if you're going to die, you may as well die fighting.
Right,
we didn't.
right.
So there was always that hope, you know, oh, I can go through this, I can do this, I can survive. I'm hungry too, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but a little bit of this, a little bit of that, I will survive. Had we known that you're going to death for sure, or almost for sure, I'm sure there would have been many people who would have said, may as well die fighting.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure. I mean, yeah, look at just it's the mindset of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. They knew that they were little options.
Definitely.
Fight
Once they
till you
knew
death.
this was the end, they, as small a group as it was. And by the way, Mordechai Anilevich was from Hashomer Asir. We call them here in Israel shmutzniks. You know, schmutz
Like
is
that's dirty, isn't it? Schmutz?
yeah, the dirty people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Shmutzniks. Because, but the fact is, many people, if you speak to them, in general, they know, yes, there were people gassed and there were people shot and there were people tortured. But when I tell my story, I do it on a very individual and subjective way, so that people can identify, can feel and imagine how it was for a kid 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, for example.
Right, right.
Because people really don't know.
No. It's unfathomable. You know, you look at these spoiled kids here when you go in America, you know, the entitlement of the generations that have come after that is just
terrible. Yeah.
it's an uphill battle.
and the ignorance. Also on TikTok, you can see many of those people that put hate and terrible things on TikTok. Many of them do it out of sheer ignorance, out of sheer not knowing really what went on, how it was, who did what, and how people could do things like burning people alive.
Well, look, the reality is the education system in the United States is not set up to welcome the history of the Native Americans, truth, history of slavery, history of the Holocaust. You don't learn that. That should not be something that you first take as an elective in college because you're looking to take classes so that, it's easy to pass. You know what I
Right.
mean? It should be
Yes.
part of civics. It should be woven into what everyone,
Should
granted,
be part
too young
of
to
the, of
learn
the
about the Holocaust, I get it, but it
exactly
should
no.
be taught.
It should be part of the curriculum.
100%. And I don't
Oh.
think it's happening anytime soon in this country, unless you go to a Jewish organization after school, whatever, that's
Right.
where, but I took classes from 3 years old on in my house, learning about the Holocaust, you know what I mean? Anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah, no, I'm glad we connected. I would want to get this out there on the 27th for the Remembrance Day. And
That's fine. It's fine. Do you want to speak to Julie? Because Julie is my partner and my editor. And I don't know if you know, but we wrote a book together, The True Adventures of Gidon Lev. And it's not just about the Holocaust. Holocaust is part of it, but part of it is also about living my life.
right.
Surviving, living, raising a family, building a country with all its problems and tribulations.
Right.
And and she's really very good at doing this. And that's how we connected 4 years ago. My wife, whom I was married to for 40 years, died 10 years ago from cancer. And I felt I didn't want to stay alone for the rest of my life. And I was looking. And then I started looking for an editor, and the two things connected.
Oh, how awesome.
I'm so bloody lucky, I can't even tell you.
So what's the name of your book?
The True Adventures of Gidon Lev.
Awesome. I love it.
And the subtitle is Rascal, Holocaust Survivor, Optimist.
Well, that's 3 good things to be. Shalom,
Thank
and
you.
I will speak to you soon.
Thank you for getting together with me.
No, my pleasure. Bless your heart.